Jesus has done many miracles. Some are very great, like giving life to Lazarus. But comparing to those great miracles, what we have listened today is a minor one. Jesus cures a deaf man who had got an impediment in his. What he did was, he is undergoing 7 steps. We can see these 7 steps clearly in the narrative to heal this person. The first one, he takes the man aside. He takes him to a separate place, moving away from the crowd. Then he put his fingers into the man's ears. That's the second step. And in the third step, he spits and then touches the man's tongue. And the fifth step, he looks up to heaven. Then he sighs. That is the sixth step. And finally, he issues a command saying, "Ephphatha, be opened." Why Jesus took all these 7 steps to heal a man from his dumbness? And the more pertinent question would be, why on earth the evangelist Mark noted all these things and put into this gospel narrative with all these little minute descriptions? Mark was addressing a community under persecution. And a community under persecution, the difficulty is that, or the difficulty they faced was, they didn't get receptive ears to listen to the gospel. Not because the message hasn't got truth in it, not because the message was appealing to them, but because the message was persecuted or suppressed. And the message was too demanding. So the community in general was in a position not to accept the message of Jesus because they had some problems in accepting it. They were actually suppressed and persecuted. And Mark was addressing this community. And now he wants to tell the people, look, we all know that this happened in the very beginning itself. It was not easy to accept this message. And he put forward this example, this miracle, and tells what are the ingredients if you want to open your ears to the message of Christ. The first step, the very first step, Jesus calls you to be different. He calls you away from the community. The message of Jesus is a beautiful message. It's a message of love, a message of service, but it doesn't go along with the mainstream thinking of the society many a times. So there is a bit difference in it. It is a bit unique. So if you choose to get healed and to be opened to the good news of Jesus, it is mandatory that you have to come out of the mainstream of the thinking and to have a personal encounter with God, with Jesus. So without that experience of God, without that experience of the divine, it is impossible for you to open your ears. If you cannot open your ears, you cannot speak. If you don't hear the message, you cannot preach it. you cannot open your tongues. So, this will lead eventually to open your mouth. If you can open your ears to the gospel by being unique, by taking a unique position in your life, eventually you can actually open your tongues. But that is another process. And here comes the next 6 steps. As we can see, again, he put his fingers into his ears, spits, touches the tongue, looks up to the heaven, sighs, and finally giving the command. Can you see something very similar in what we enact today on the altar? It's quite similar, isn't it? He takes the bread and he looks up to the heavens and then breaks the bread, give it to his disciples, and then pronounce the words. So which means a kind of rubrics. In the early church, I think it was not a big church like this. They had small congregations which they called as the Domus Ecclesia, which means house churches. In houses, in small homes, they gathered together and they started to listen to the Jesus story, and then they started to enact the Eucharist. That means taking the bread and the sharing the bread under the leadership of the apostles. Now, the Mark is asking his disciples, look, if you want to hear the gospel and to live that message, what you have to do is, you have to enact these rubrics, maybe the sacrament in your life. Without a sacramental life, you may not get that conviction, and you cannot enliven your faith so that you can actually pronounce it, you can actually speak it up to the whole world. Otherwise, there will be an impediment to talk. So, once you have to open your mouths by listening to the gospel and choosing to be with Jesus, separate from the community in silence and to accept his message, and now you have to strengthen your faith in the community, in the Domus Ecclesia, or in church, or in liturgy, in the sacraments, and then automatically what happens, your mouth will be opened. And it is happening in today's gospel. It says, and Jesus ordered them to tell no one about it. But the more he insisted, the more widely they published it. Jesus told them not to speak, but they couldn't but speak, because they had this experience of Jesus, and they had this repeated experience of Jesus' encounter in the liturgy, in their prayer meetings, and now they cannot but speak. And this is the transformation Jesus is expecting from us today.